Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Living Covenant podcast. I am here today with Blake Penland. Blake and I went on a Bible Lands trip just before COVID to Europe and the Middle East, and I just really loved hearing his perspectives on things while we were over there. And he's written another article for us for this series called "The Crown and the Silence" on the story of Saul. So, welcome to the show, Blake. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's I'm excited to be here and happy to contribute and hopefully give some insight that is useful to people. That's kind of my goal this year. I always try to pick something every year, and my goal this year was to be useful. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, cool. Well, before we get into the life of Saul, do you want to give the audience a little bit of insight into the life of Blake?
Yeah, sure. Well, what do you want to know? There's a lot of insights and a lot of things.
How about you tell us what you do for a living, whether or not you have a family, and maybe what your favorite food is?
Cool. So I've done a lot of different things in my life for a living. Been a lumberjack. I have been a teacher. I've been a support worker. I was a pastor actually for 15 years as well too. So 8 years volunteer, and then 7 years as a full-time paid pastor. And I planted a church, which was really cool, and I love that. I was a director of operations for a physical therapy business, and then now I am a counselor as well too. So I've done quite an eclectic mix of different things. Did I say I was a primary teacher as well too? I think I threw that in there, but yeah, I've done a ton of different things. But I am currently now working. I have a business. It's called Beyond Exodus, where I provide therapy, counseling, and a bit of coaching and mentoring as well too. For probably my main area of focus is I help pastors and their families, ministry families, leaders of the church, and pastors specifically and their families as well too, helping them through difficult times with dealing with maybe depression or grief recovery, or just dealing with anxiety and general difficulties that we all deal with. But I probably 60% of my time I focus on ministry families and pastors and leaders of the church. And then I probably help just the general public as well too. I really focus on helping people who are recovering from divorce or separation, and I try to help them. I call it the divorce recovery blueprint, and I help them rebuild their lives after everything has fallen apart. So that's kind of what I do now. Do it all online. I have a couple people I see in person, but most everyone I see is online. So I help people out. It's pretty cool, and I enjoy that. You said my family, yeah. So I'm married. My wife's from Brazil. Her name is Gianna is her name, but it's spelled like Diana the princess. But in Portuguese, the DI makes a G sound, so we just call her G for short. We live with my daughter as well too. She is, oh wow, she's 14 years old now. That's scary, actually. Let's not say that again. She's getting older, and take her to a lot of basketball games and love that. And she's very, very big up into basketball. And then my favorite food is pretty much anything my wife cooks, honestly. She kind of spoiled me for going out to eat because her food is better than the restaurants. It's kind of ruined
food?
My life in some ways. Yeah, it's all Brazilian. Well, she does Italian and Brazilian, all sorts of stuff. But in some ways, I'm like, you've ruined my restaurant experience, because now when I go, I'm like, yeah, this isn't really as good as when you make it. Yeah, so she makes the best risotto. It's like mind blowing. So anything she cooks.
They say you're a good cook if you can make good risotto.
And she can. So she's. I would say that's probably a good test, because it's like a 40-minute process. It's crazy. All the love you got to put into it. So
yeah, awesome. Well, you started your piece by writing, there are some stories in scripture we turn to for inspiration, and others we return to because they won't let us go. Now, I'm curious to know, was your reason for choosing to write about Saul born out of the former or the latter of that?
Yeah, Saul is not one of my favorite characters in the Bible at all, not even close. But it's probably all of the lessons that really hit home, that it's like the lessons of what not to do. It's kind of an instruction manual. His life is an instruction manual on what not to do if you're given influence or power or any form of responsibility or leadership. It's like, go read the story of Saul to help you know everything not to do. And we often talk about the Bible in a way that is, I like to use it as the basic instructions before leaving Earth, the BIBLE. But we kind of disregard or throw away sometimes all the instruction manual that is what not to do, right? So we read the story of Joseph and like, yeah, we want to be like him, or like David, like, yeah, I'm going to kill this giant. It's going to be super awesome. And we want to destroy the giants in our lives that hurt us, but no one really talks about, let's talk about Saul, because there are some really, really powerful lessons to learn from his life on what not to do when we're put in that situation. And pretty insightful mental health insights as well too.
Yeah, can you unpack that a little bit for those people who haven't really explored Saul's story in much depth? Can you give us like a overview of what his story entails?
Yeah, he was a big guy, so I relate to that as well too. He's big. He was head and shoulders above everybody else, and then he was on a mission to go get his father's donkeys, and wound up being king of the entire nation. So not many people can say that, like, I was out searching for donkeys and I came home as a king. And so the people had basically rebelled against God's plan of having prophets as leaders who were kind of conduits to the spiritual realm and through basically to God. And they were like, no, we want to be like everyone else. We want a king. And God basically told the prophets, like, hey, you don't actually want this because here's all the bad things that are going to happen. They're like, we love that idea. Give us a king. That's a great idea. And God's like, okay, if that's what you want, I'll do it, but I don't think you're going to like it. And Saul is the first king of Israel, and he is anointed and chosen by God. But when he becomes the king, things don't play out in the way that everyone had hoped for, I believe. So he was very successful. He killed like thousands of people, actually, in terms of like from a warrior perspective, because back then being a king was a lot of war. So he was really good at that. But he seemed to struggle over and over and over with doing the right thing or doing what was best by doing something that was good, at least in his eyes. And so oftentimes good can be the enemy of best. And he struggles with that throughout his entire life. Then he gets jealous of David, who is going to be the next king chosen by God, because, humans are jealous, and that's a big part of it. And then he starts losing his mind a little bit when he's throwing spears at David and trying to kill him, and hunts him down for most of his life. And finally ends up, very sadly, the end of his story is going to this seance or at the Witch of Endor to call up the prophet, and who had previously been involved in his life, and he had passed away. He calls him up from the dead, even though it's not him, but he calls up an evil spirit that is representing him. And he is told that he's going to be killed, and his son's going to be killed the next day in a battle. And then he loses his life by taking his own life, because the guy who is serving him refuses to listen to the command of the king, because he tells him, kill me, because I don't want to be killed by my enemy. And he's like, I won't do it. And so he actually ends up committing suicide, which is a really, really sad ending of that story, when he had so much promise. Now, that's a very short version over many, many, many years. But it was, I think the theme of that is struggling to fulfill his calling that God had placed on his life in pursuit of his own personal comfort or desires. And that, I think, is a very relevant story for us in today's age, and with everything that we have available. We have been given this calling that God has placed upon our life, and yet we run away from that for ease and comfort and anxiety. We don't want to deal with it all.
Yeah, it's not like a lot of the other Bible characters, I suppose, where something happens and there's this big turnaround moment and they trust God and I guess
you keep thinking it's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
you
but
keep
it just
thinking like, this is it. And then no, it's getting worse. Like, wow, it's worse and worse and worse. It just gets, and then it ends in him taking his own life. And I think that's actually a lesson in and of itself. Like, things don't just get better unless you make real changes.
Mm.
Like if you just keep thinking it's going to get better, you go read the story of Saul and you go, oh, it actually doesn't get better if you don't turn back to God. If you don't make the decision to say, not my way, but your way, Lord, not my will, but your will be done.
Mm. Talk to us a little more about that. You know, you mentioned there's some lessons about mental health in here, and I feel like sometimes people don't know when to act and when to just pray about it and let God move. It's kind of like this confusion as to like, oh, do I just trust that God is going to change circumstances and do stuff? Or am I guess, taking over control by acting out in certain ways and doing things to change the
Yeah, I
situation?
think the biblical answer for that would be yes. To both, because we have the example in, well, when we go back to Moses and the Israelites, and so Saul is the king of Israel, and so we have to look at his history as well too. Moses, they, you know, through God's power, they part the Red Sea and they walk through on dry ground. Very clear direction, like that's the way. Walk ye in it, right? Then later on, when they cross the Jordan, the priests actually step out into the flowing water, and it's not until they're in the water doing the thing that the water stops. Then the path is made clear and everyone crosses. And so it's important for us to recognize there are times that we wait and there are times that we need to act. But both of those times, they're intentional. They're intentional times. They're either like, okay, Lord, I don't know the direction, so I'm going to intentionally wait for your guidance in this. And I'm going to prayerfully request your guidance and your decision making. And hopefully you will make it clear what I need to do, what my next steps need to be. The other one is I'm intentionally, Lord, I'm going to go this direction. I'm going to walk out into the water. And if this is the path, I'm going to keep going. If not, stop me and bring me back, right? But both of those are intentionality. And so whenever you're thinking, I don't know what to do, and you're on the fence and you're kind of being lukewarm about a situation, well, that's not intentional, right? And that's when you can really know, okay, well, this is clearly not the direction that I need to be going, because I'm kind of floating along and I'm not intentionally going or intentionally waiting. And so whatever you do, don't do nothing expecting that there is incredible changes on the horizon. Be intentional about waiting or intentional about going forward. Or sometimes you need to step back as well too, but whatever it is, be intentional about it. And I think that helps us to make better decisions when we're making decisions and not waiting for decisions to be made. Because by waiting, like deciding to wait, is actually, that's a good decision, because you're like, I'm choosing to wait for your leadership and guidance. But that's different than just doing nothing but not being intentional about the situation. So for me, I would say, yeah, be intentional with your actions or your inactions and invite the process.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I think sometimes also people, maybe they act or they don't act, they're passive or they take things into their own control because of things that they believe about themselves as well. So like we see Saul, for example, when we read his story, we kind of get the impression that he thought of himself as small or insignificant or unworthy, and out of that comes certain actions. How can we start to become aware of, I guess, the lies that we're living by that are dictating those decisions that are just happening in our lives?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Talk about it. Like the best way to expose a lie is to go and tell it to your friends and to your family, or maybe to some professional counseling or therapy, and go, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. And I want to get this out in the kind of the ether into the world. And I want to talk about it because I want to ask, is this accurate or is this inaccurate? And I want to know, and I want some time to reflect personally, and I want some other perspective on this as well too. And so it's so easy to believe a lie in a vacuum. It's very difficult for the truth of a matter to be hidden when exposure comes. So like when the light comes and hits, the truth is revealed. But when you're living a lie, or when you are hiding something, or believing something that you're not really exposing the light to, or being authentic with yourself or with others,
Mm.
that's where kind of that can metastasize. So that's where inaccuracy and self-loathing and lies metastasize and grow inside of our minds when we're not actually authentically sharing that and communicating that with the people around us as well too.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah,
Which
I did
which is not
this.
always easy. It's kind of difficult
No,
sometimes.
it is difficult. Yeah. I did this experiment once where I asked people, I was like, what do you see in me that you don't think I realize about me? And it's not a pleasant experience because you're like, oh
No.
man, people see that or they think that. And yeah, but if you're ready for it, it's a
Well, you might not be ready for it, but it's
exactly, yeah.
important. Like that level of vulnerability and authenticity with yourself and with others, you will not remain stagnant. You will not remain frozen in your journey or in your experience. Like you will be forced, when you're that vulnerable, you will be forced to make a decision for better or for worse to change, right?
Mm,
And that's what we see Saul not doing. He
mm,
refuses to be vulnerable, right? So
mm,
when the prophet Samuel comes to talk to him and goes, "What have you done? Why are you, who's the king, acting like a prophet when you're not supposed to be?" And he's like, "It's not really my fault. Okay, the people are kind of crazy and they needed a little bit of like guidance, and like you weren't away, man. You were along. Where were you? Huh? Like what? Where were you supposed to be? What I'm doing your job actually. You should
mm,
be fired. It's just like goes down this path of ridiculousness because he's not being vulnerable. He's not taking responsibility for himself, and he's blaming everyone but himself for his problems. It's David's
mm.
fault, right? If I throw a spear at
Yeah.
him and kill him, pin him to the wall, maybe all my problems will be solved, right? But very rarely is that the case. So
Mm.
actually, I want to go on the record. Throwing a spear at someone to pin them to the wall is never the answer. So if you don't get
Yeah.
anything else from this podcast, remember, don't spear people.
Mm. I don't want to take sides with Saul, but part of me does feel for him, and not just for Saul, but I think I feel for people in leadership positions and pastors, because for me, it's not so difficult to like confess my wrongdoings to a friend
True.
or to be exposed because what audience do I have? But if I had a following of, I don't know, 100,000 people, or if I was a pastor of a church and everyone was looking up to me and admiring me, I think I would find it really difficult to be honest about the struggles in my life. And not just because I don't want people to know, but I think because with that comes, potentially for some people that's a loss of job, or potentially that's a loss of a role, or it's a loss of respect. Like I think the effects of that are much larger than just me and my friends finding out things, kind of thing. So I guess this is something I'd be curious to hear about from you, because I know that you've been in leadership positions, you've been a pastor, you've been a teacher, and you have been in that position where people have been looking up to you. Have you, I guess, found that difficult? Have you found yourself in Saul's position where you're like, oh, it's actually really hard to do that in this position?
No, super easy. Never had any struggles with that. It's just like really easy to be a leader. Yeah, moving on. No, in all seriousness, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? So it's very easy. I like to use this a little bit of a redneck wisdom. I grew up in a trailer and a log cabin, and my family is a very colorful background for sure. But my dad used to have a saying. He said, "Everyone knows how to deal with a kicking cow except for the owner of the kicking cow." And so it's super easy to be like, man, if I was a pastor, I would never do that. Oh, he should do
Yeah.
this as a pastor. Like, what an idiot. Oh, he's terrible at doing this. Like, you have no idea all of the strings being pulled, all the struggles, all the burdens of a leader, of anything, a church especially, but of anything. And right.
Mm.
And the more reach and influence and impact that you have, the heavier the burden. Like, I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be the prime minister of Australia, or worse, the president of America. Oh, that's
Yeah.
like, it would just be, nothing you could ever do would be correct. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican or labor or liberal, it doesn't matter, because you're always going to be wrong to someone, right? And so being in that leadership role, you have to find people that you can confide in. So you don't have to go and be vulnerable and authentic to the whole world all the time, because there's a time and a place for everything. But finding someone, and this could be professional help as well too, and probably would recommend this as well too. In biblical times, we would call those advisors, and maybe now we would call them counselors or psychologists or therapists, right? And so having people that we can go and break down all the stuff that's going on in our head and say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, like, give me some feedback on this, help me to process this. And ultimately you have the decision as the leader to do whatever you need to do for your life and for the lives of those that you lead. But having advisors and wise words, people who are not just yes men or yes women, but people who are going to give you honest feedback, helps you be a better version of yourself and a better leader as well too. And it is really easy to point fingers at bad leadership, but just remember, you have multiple fingers pointing back at you when you point a finger at someone, right? So like every time you point the finger at someone, you have to be very willing to accept the criticism that is being returned back towards you. And that's not always fun or easy to think about, but just before you criticize, if you're going to go criticize them to their face as well too, rather than telling everyone around them how terrible they are without telling them, because that is the literal spirit of Lucifer when you go and tell everyone else how bad that person is without having a conversation one-on-one with them. You do not want that in your life. And if you find yourself doing that, you need to check yourself and go, I should probably stop doing that. Or if that's being done to you, which is the case when we look at Saul and David, like Saul is literally jealous and angry and pointing all the fingers that it's all David's fault, not looking at himself. Later on, David does a terrible thing with a young woman. He ends up killing her husband and has a baby with her and ends up marrying her. And then the prophet comes in and says, there's a terrible thing that you've done. And when the prophet comes and tells a different prophet, that's the Nathan prophet, when Samuel comes and tells Saul, this is a terrible thing that you've done, right? Saul blames everybody but himself. When Nathan comes and says, this is a terrible thing that you've done, and it was, both those things are bad things. It wasn't, I would even say David's thing was probably even crazier and worse. David goes, you're right. That was wrong. And I repent. And I'm going to ask God for forgiveness. And he still paid the consequences, but that's the different approach. Like if you can get honest feedback, what you do with that feedback really reveals the character that you have.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about someone as well who does do something wrong, but then instead of cowering in shame and running away, owns up to that and shows up. Because I think that's probably the tempting thing to do, is just be like, oh, everyone's found out, I'm out of here because I can't handle this.
I think guilt and shame, like just what you're talking about, I want to point this out. I think guilt is a good thing from God, and I think shame is a bad thing from Satan. And so guilt is like, hey, you have done some pretty terrible things and you need to change your ways. And guilt is like, I'm going to repent. I'm going to change my ways. That's guilt. Shame is, you are a pretty terrible person. You are terrible. And then the shame says, I am a terrible person. I'm terrible. I'm the worst. I'm pathetic. I'm awful. I'm stupid, right? That's shame talking. It's not useful, right? You can't do anything with that. You're like, yep, I'm the worst. And that's it. Then you just move forward with your head down. You don't move anywhere. Sometimes you become stagnant, right? And so shame is totally useless. But guilt, and when other people use shame to you, that's bad as well too. But guilt helps us to realize you're not the problem. Your behavior is inaccurate. Change your behavior. Whereas shame is like saying you are the issue and there's nothing you can do. You're just a loser. When you hear that voice from others or from yourself, you need to go to God and say, that doesn't sound like guilt. That sounds like shame. Please help me to reframe that. Please help me to understand where that's coming from and help me to move forward with you as the focus, Lord. That's the difference between guilt and shame.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. For people who are kind of trying to figure that out or are trying to reframe those narratives, do you have any helpful tips?
For sure. You need to ask yourself every time you're feeling if you're feeling anything, first off, all emotions are valid. So every emotion that we have as human beings, totally valid. Now, validity of an emotion doesn't mean it's true. It just means it's a valid emotion. Like that's coming from somewhere. So then you got to go and ask yourself, okay, I'm a loser, right? So that's what you're thinking. I'm a loser. Okay. Automatically, it's a shame-based statement because it's not about behavior. It's about identity, right? So you're saying that I am a loser is shameful kind of connotations and thought process. So every time you feel these feelings, you need to think to yourself, is this about my behavior or is this about my identity? And when it's about identity, you need to change you ask yourself, what about my behavior is making me feel like a loser? And then you can turn that into a guilt phrase and you can go, oh, I'm a loser because I am behaving in a way that makes other people not want to be around me because I'm being mean or angry or terrible. And those behaviors, right, are the things that I can change. But you can't just go and flip a switch and change your identity. So that's why you have to think to yourself, how did I get to this shame statement? Well, it's probably based on some sort of guilt from somewhere. And now I need to go and analyze. And that's where going to a therapist is really useful and go, this is what I'm feeling. How can we transfer this to a guilt statement instead of a shame statement? It's super useful because I have that all the time. Like, oh man, I'm stupid. I'm a loser. I'm no good. Like I think that all the time. It's actually almost a daily event. And then I'm like, hold on, that's a shame statement. I go, why am I saying this? And I think to myself, oh, maybe because I did this or did that. Okay, let's work on that behavior. A good example would be like, I'm a fat slob. Like, so you say that about yourself. Okay, why are you saying that? Well, I didn't do any exercise today, right? So let's reverse that shame statement of being a fat slob and saying, well, I didn't exercise today. So now I'm going to go and exercise. See how much healthier that is? It's just like a complete transition from an unhealthy perspective to a healthy one.
Yeah, Blake and I were talking before we recorded this. We're both doing our Masters of Counseling at the moment. And I'm sure you can, well, you just said, Blake, that even now, you've studied, you've kind of gone through that process, you've seen counselors. Even now, daily, you have to kind of like recorrect those lies. It's an ongoing thing.
All the time.
Yeah.
So, in fact,
no shame in that either.
There's no shame, no. And I think it's important to remember that, like, that's called being a human. Welcome to the club. If you have negative perceptions of yourself, like, welcome to authenticity and if you have only positive perceptions of yourself, you should also go and see a therapist immediately. Like, because if you don't have a realistic view of who you are, like that's a whole other version of issues as well too. So both sides, like, it's very useful to have a realistic perspective of who you are, but to differentiate that from shame and guilt and go, is this about who I am? Which really, the only true answer to that is you are a child of God. You have infinite value and worth because of that. And then your behaviors are not who you are. That's just things that you do or that you don't do. And those can be changed. And that's the difference between guilt and shame. And the story of Saul really helps us to see basically unbridled shame leads to the end of Saul's life.
Yeah.
Because he can never acknowledge he needs to change his behaviors. He can never acknowledge his own responsibility. He is always passing the buck on to someone else. And in doing that, never being vulnerable, never acknowledging his own guilt, never really making changes, it ends in spiritual death. And in Saul's case, his literal death as well too.
Yeah, so unfortunate. Obviously, we don't see a huge turnaround in his story, obviously, if it ended in him giving his life up. But I think it was interesting, as you said in your article you wrote, but even as Saul wrestles with these forces, we still see God's compassion. God is not in a hurry to replace Saul. He tries to soothe him and bring healing through music. Before judgment, he sends music. And I think that was just interesting because obviously we see, and we'll get to this in a minute, I guess, what this whole thing says about God. But I'm just curious as to this music part, because for you, I kind of get what you're saying, like he's brought music for a certain purpose. And it sounds like in your experiences in life, you've been helped through like counseling. But are there other things that in your own journey that have been like strange
Immensely.
blessings that have helped you in
So
yeah.
I own a couple guitars. Actually, man, I might own three guitars as well, but I really only play the one all the time. And I go to therapy sessions. It's just me and my guitar, and I write songs, and that's my therapy. Like that's probably my most useful therapy sessions that I have is me, my guitar, and God. And I will write songs that I pour out my heart to God. Some of my songs I cannot sing in public. They're very inappropriate, but they're useful for my own therapy because I'm being vulnerable and I'm being honest and authentic with God, and I'm singing about these issues. And the music has been such a healing factor in my life. I have really painful songs. I've got happy songs as well too, about feeling good as well too. But I mean, I don't even, I've probably written like 200 songs in my life. I don't even know. But, and some of them will never be sung ever again because they were just needed for that moment in that time in my life to process that emotion in a way that I believe would not have been possible otherwise. So for me, the music and creating music, and I feel like it's not just the music, but I feel like it's the creative aspect because we are created in the image of God, and God is a creator. So anytime we partake in creative behavior, we are connecting with our creator in a way that is otherwise, not possible or relevant. And when we talk about anxiety, sorry, just a sidestep here, there's this thing called the anxiety death spiral where you hop on board and you just go down and down and down, and it gets worse and everything, and like, oh, that's going to happen, and this, and logically speaking, like, well, if that happens, then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then, oh no, and then this is going to happen, and oh no, I know that's going to happen, and you spiral out of control, right? The way to sever this, there's been some really cool research on this recently, is to activate the other hemisphere. Now I'm dyslexic, so it's not going to be useful to say left or right. Whatever one the logic side is not on, the other side, the creative side, your anxiety is just having a heyday in your logical hemisphere. Like, just like, yeah, let's rock and roll. We're going to take over. Like, oh, this is awesome. And then on the other hemisphere, which is the creative side, has nothing to do with the logical side. And so when we activate the creative side, we are severing the anxiety death spiral. So some really good examples to do this. You can look up some different things, but one of them would be pick up a pen. If you're stressing out with anxiety, pick up a pen and with your offhand. So I'm right-handed, so pick up a pen with your left hand, write your name with your left hand, write your name backwards with your left hand, write your name from the top to the bottom with your left hand, from the bottom to the top, write it upside down. So you're activating the creative aspect of your mind. Now, for me, anything creative, so watercolor painting, creative writing of a novel or a fantasy book, if you want to write that, or a non-fictional book, like getting creative, doing some drawing, or for me, songwriting. What that does is it literally cuts off and stops the anxiety death spiral so that you can actually live again without being a slave to the spiral. You actually get to live, and you're living because you're opening that door for the creator to come into your life with this creative aspect of your life. So you're cutting off that anxiety death spiral in the logical side of your brain, and you are opening that creativity for the other side of your brain, and it allows your brain, then you're using your whole brain, and it allows you to alleviate that anxiety. It's pretty cool. That's why the music for me is so powerful, because it's literally my creative sever to anxiety.
That's actually amazing. I just feel like I need to sit here and soak that in. I've always wondered with music, I'm like, yeah, man, obviously music is such a powerful form of worship. And for some people, that's like how they interact with God and engage with God and like where they feel close with God. But I've never really fully understood why. but you explaining that has kind of brought clarity to that. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm glad. happy to share. And for me, I think more than the music is the creative aspect of the music, right? So for me,
Sure.
that's where that really means a lot personally. But I mean, you can be creative. That's another example, actually, like creative dance, right? So if I ever am dancing, this could be a shame statement, but I'm a bad dancer. And I don't think a lot of people are going to want to watch me dance, and I'm not really a dancer. I don't have much of a dancer's body. I've been blessed with a lot of body, but not a dancer's body. But for me, the music of creating the music, that's the thing that helps. But for someone else, it could be interpretive dance, and they could hear the music and get creative, and that could help their anxiety. I could totally see that being a very real thing that is useful and helpful.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. Well, we have touched a lot on the life of Saul here, and I think these Old Testament characters can teach us what to do, what not to do in this case, probably. But I'm curious, in reading about Saul's story, did you have any revelations about God in that?
Yeah. So the biggest revelation was God's patience. God crowned Saul, and Saul was literally behaving inappropriately for like 40 years. Maybe even more, 42 maybe. I don't know exactly the exact number, but many, many years of complete inappropriate behavior. And that's a guilt statement because we don't want to shame him, but very inappropriate behavior. And yet God never gave up on him. And in fact, in the end of the story, even though Saul commits suicide, which is terrible, it's not God giving up on Saul, it's Saul giving up on himself. And I think that was the biggest revelation in that story, is like, if you have breath in your lungs, blood in your veins, if you have synapses firing in your mind, you still have an opportunity to follow the Lord. And you still have an opportunity to come back to right the wrongs that you're responsible for, and to live a life that is worth living and worth sharing with others. And that was powerful for me.
Yeah. Love it.
So
awesome. Well,
I still have time in my life. That's the good news. And so do you, and so does everyone.
Still got another 30 years that I can stuff up, I think.
Maybe more. No, even more.
Yeah.
You got many more. God will never give up on you. But that doesn't mean save that for 30 years down the road, because you saw
For sure.
how terrible Saul's life was and his mental health and all of his issues. You can stop all that right now by getting back with God and following him. And when the only difference between like a righteous person and an unrighteous person is getting back up. Because a righteous man, he falls 7 times and he stands up again, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like righteous people do more righteous things. It's just when they mess up, they get back up again. And that's the difference. So like, I'm not very good at it, but I want to be righteous. So when I fall, and I do often, and I'm guilty of many, many things, I don't want to stay fallen. I want to confess my sins. I want to talk to God, and I want to acknowledge my guilty behavior. And I want to ask for both repentance and the ability to be better moving forward. And no matter how I fall, in whatever way that I fall, I don't want to stay fallen. I want to get back up, and I want to like crawl and claw my way back into a healthy relationship with God. And if that's every minute of every day, that's still better than staying fallen.
100%. Well, Blake, I feel like this conversation has been very useful. So you're definitely leaning into your motto for the year. But no, in all seriousness, thank you so much for your transparency and your insights. For anyone who would like to read the full story, you can check it out in the Living Covenant book. It's called The Crown and the Silence. Well, Thank you again, Blake. It's been good having you on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.